I'm 78 years old, and I spent 55 years of my life chasing something that never existed. I worked 60-hour weeks, I missed birthdays, I skipped vacations. I told myself it was all worth it because someday I'd have enough. Enough money, enough security, enough success to finally relax and enjoy everything I'd built. But here's what nobody tells you: someday never comes. And by the time you figure that out, the people you were doing it all for, they've stopped waiting. I'm not here to lecture you. I don't have the energy for that anymore. And honestly, I'm not sure I've earned the right. I made every mistake you're probably making right now. The only difference between us is that I'm running out of time to fix mine, and you still have a chance to fix yours. So while I'm still here, while I can still remember the words, and still find the breath to say them, let me tell you what 55 years of getting it wrong finally taught me. I've lived through things most people only read about in history books. I was born in 1946, right after the war ended. I watched the moon landing on a 12-inch black and white television in my mother's living room. I lived through recessions that wiped out entire neighborhoods. I saw factories close and towns die and families fall apart under the weight of circumstances nobody asked for. I buried both my parents. I buried 3 of my closest friends. And about 7 years ago, I almost got buried myself. We'll get to that. I grew up in Detroit, Motor City. Back then, if you could show up on time and work with your hands, you could make something of yourself. That's what my father told me, and that's what I believed. So that's exactly what I did. I started at the Ford plant when I was 23 years old, fresh out of the service, newly married, convinced that I was going to give my family everything I never had growing up. And for 55 years, that's exactly what I chased. I chased and I chased and I chased until I forgot what I was even running toward. The thing is, I caught it. That's the part nobody warned you about. I got the house. I got the car. I got the promotions. I retired with a pension and a gold watch and a handshake from a man whose name I can't even remember anymore. And when I finally stopped running, when I finally had time to look around at everything I'd built, I realized I was standing in a beautiful house full of people who felt like strangers. My wife was there. My kids were grown. But somewhere along the way, I had become a guest in my own life. Let me tell you what happened 7 years ago. It was March of 2017. I was 71 years old, about 2 years into retirement, and I was at my grandson's basketball game. His name is Tyler. He was 12 at the time. My son David had been asking me to come to his games for years, but I always had something. Work at first, then after retirement it was golf, doctor's appointments, errands that somehow felt urgent. Always excuses. Always reasons why next time would be better. But that Saturday, I showed up. I remember walking into that gymnasium and the noise just hit me like a wave. Sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, parents yelling from the bleachers, kids running around everywhere, and there was Tyler, warming up near the free throw line, shooting practice shots. When he saw me walk through those doors, the way his face lit up, I'll never forget it. He waved at me with both hands over his head like I was some kind of celebrity. And I remember thinking, how many of these have I missed? How many ways like that never happened because I just wasn't there to see them? The game started, and Tyler wasn't a starter, so he sat on the bench. I was in the bleachers, 3rd row up, sitting next to my wife Linda. And about 10 minutes into the first quarter, I started feeling this pressure in my chest. Not pain exactly. Just pressure. Like someone was sitting on me. I told myself it was nothing, probably just the hot dog from the concession stand disagreeing with me. I was always telling myself things were nothing, always pushing through. That's what men of my generation did. Then my left arm went numb. The next thing I remember, I'm on the gymnasium floor. People are standing over me in a circle. Linda is screaming my name over and over. And Tyler, my grandson Tyler, is standing at the edge of the basketball court in his sweaty jersey, just frozen there, staring at me with these wide, terrified eyes. That image still haunts me. The paramedics came. I don't remember the ambulance ride. I don't remember arriving at the hospital. What I remember is waking up in a room with tubes coming out of my arms and machines beeping and a doctor standing at the foot of my bed telling me I was lucky to be alive. Lucky. That word kept bouncing round in my head for days. Lucky. I spent 55 years building a life I was too busy to actually live, and I nearly died at the very first real moment I decided to show up for. That's not luck. That's a warning shot. And I finally started to listen. In the weeks after my heart attack, I had a lot of time to think. Hospital beds will do that to you. No phone calls to make, no meetings to run to, no distractions, just you and the ceiling and the steady beeping of machines reminding you that you're still here. And I started thinking about all the people who had passed through my life, the ones I'd loved, the ones I'd lost, the ones I'd taken for granted because I assumed they'd always be there. Let me tell you about my friend Eddie Kowalczyk. We worked together at the plant for 32 years. Same shift, same lunch break, same break room, complaining about the same supervisors and the same vending machine coffee. Eddie was the kind of guy who never seemed to worry about anything. He'd clock out at exactly 5 o'clock, go home to his wife Marlene, spend his weekends fishing at this little lake about an hour north of the city, or tinkering with old cars in his garage. I used to give him such a hard time about it. I'd say, Eddie, you could move up if you just put in the extra hours. You could make supervisor. You could really make something of yourself. And Eddie would just shrug his shoulders, take a sip of his coffee and say, I already made something of myself, Walt. I made a life. I didn't understand what he meant back then. I thought he was lazy, unambitious, just settling for mediocrity because he didn't have what it took to compete. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts, volunteering for every overtime opportunity, doing everything I possibly could to climb that ladder. And you know what? I made supervisor. I got the corner office with my name on the door. I got the bigger paycheck and the reserved parking spot and all the things that were supposed to mean I'd made it. And Eddie stayed right where he was. Same position for 30 years, same lunch break, same 5 o'clock departure. And he was the happiest man I ever knew. Eddie died in 2014, peaceful. In his sleep, Marlene told me he went to bed that night talking about a fishing trip they were planning for that coming weekend. His funeral was standing room only. I'm not exaggerating. People were lined up outside the church, and these were people I'd never even seen before. All of them telling stories about how Eddie had touched their lives, how he'd given them rides when their cars broke down, how he'd shown up at their door with a casserole when someone got sick, how he remembered their kids' names, their anniversaries, their struggles, how he'd just sit and listen without trying to fix everything. And I sat there in that church pew in my nice suit, surrounded by all these people who actually knew Eddie, and I thought, if I died tomorrow, who would tell stories like that about me? Who would I have shown up for? I spent 32 years working right next to a man who had it all figured out, and I was too busy feeling superior to learn a single thing from him. That's the first lesson that took me 55 years to learn. Success isn't what they tell you it is. They tell you it's the promotion, the money, the title on your business card, the size of your office. But real success, the kind that actually means something when they're lowering you into the ground, is having people at your funeral who truly knew you, not people who worked for you. Not people who shook your hand at some conference and forgot your name an hour later. People you showed up for, again and again, in the small, ordinary moments that don't seem important until they're the only moments that matter anymore. Here's another thing I learned, and this one cuts even deeper. Your children are only children once. And it happens so fast, so terrifyingly fast, that if you blink too many times, you'll miss the whole thing, and you cannot go back. There's no amount of money, no amount of success, no amount of wishing that can give you back a single one of those days. My son David is 51 years old now. He's successful. Good job, beautiful family, turned out better than I probably deserved. But I remember when he was 7 years old And Linda told me something years later that I've never been able to shake. She said that every night David would stand at the front window of our house, pressing his little face against the glass, watching for my headlights to come down the street. Every single night, waiting for his dad to come home. And most nights, I got home long after he was already in bed. Linda would tell him I was working late, that I'd see him in the morning, that Daddy loved him very much. But here's what I didn't understand back then. Kids don't understand working late. They don't understand sacrifice or providing for the future or building something that will last. They understand presence. They understand who shows up and who doesn't. And more often than not, I didn't. I told myself I was doing it for him, for his future, for security. But David didn't need a future secured by my absence. He needed a father. He needed me standing at that door when he was looking for me through the glass. We have a good relationship now, David and me. Better than I probably deserve, honestly. He's a generous man. He forgave things I never properly apologized for. But there are entire years of his childhood that I can never get back. Birthdays that happened without me. School plays I never saw. Little League games I'd promised to attend and then something came up. Work called. It was always work. And here's the thing about work. Work didn't care about me. Not really. When I finally retired after 35 years, they replaced me in a week. 1 week. All those late nights, all those missed dinners, all those sacrifices, and I was as replaceable as a machine part. But you know who can never replace me? My son, my daughter, my grandchildren. The people who actually needed me to be present while I was too busy being needed somewhere that never needed me at all. Let me tell you about my daughter Karen. She's 48 now. Lives in Seattle with her husband and 2 kids. I don't see her as often as I'd like. 3,000 miles is a lot of distance, and these old bones don't travel the way they used to. But we talk on the phone every Sunday morning, every single Sunday without fail. That phone call is the highlight of my week now. Funny how priorities shift when you realize time isn't infinite. Karen was always the sensitive one, the quiet one. David was loud and athletic and easy to understand. But Karen, she was complicated in ways I didn't have the patience to figure out back then. She wrote poetry. She painted these strange, abstract pictures that I pretended to understand, but never really did. She asked questions about feelings and meaning and purpose, and I didn't have answers for any of it. So I did what I knew how to do. I worked. I provided. I stayed out of her way and let Linda handle the emotional stuff. There was this one night. Karen must have been about 15 or 16. She came downstairs while I was watching the news after a long shift. She sat down on the couch next to me and she said, "Dad, do you think I matter?" Just like that. Out of nowhere. "Do you think I matter?" And you know what I said? I said, "Of course you matter, sweetheart. Now let me finish watching this." I didn't even look at her. I just kept staring at that television screen like whatever was happening in the world was more important than my own daughter sitting right next to me, asking me to tell her she was enough. She went back upstairs. We never talked about it again, but I've thought about that moment probably 1,000 times since my heart attack. What was she going through that night? What did she need from me that I was too distracted to give? I'll never know. She doesn't remember it. I asked her about it a few years ago, and she had no idea what I was talking about. But I remember every detail, the sound of the news anchor's voice, the way the lamp cast shadows across the living room, the look on her face when she got up from that couch and walked away from her father, who couldn't be bothered to pause his program and look his daughter in the eyes. That's what I mean when I say presence matters. It's not about grand gestures. It's not about expensive gifts or elaborate vacations or any of the things we convince ourselves will make up for not being there. It's about the small moments, the ones that seem insignificant when they're happening but turn out to be the moments people remember forever. Karen needed me for 30 seconds that night, 30 seconds of my full attention, and I couldn't give it to her. I was too busy watching strangers on a screen talk about things that had nothing to do with my actual life. It is what I've come to understand after all these years. We've got it completely backwards. Everything society tells you about what matters, about what you should be chasing, about what success looks like, it's wrong. Not just a little wrong. Completely, dangerously, life-destroyingly wrong. They tell you to hustle, to grind, to sacrifice now so you can enjoy later. They tell you that rest is for the weak and busy is a badge of honor. They tell you that your worth is measured by your productivity, your income, your title, the things you accumulate. And we believe it. God help us, we believe every word of it. I believed it for 55 years, but here's the truth that nobody wants to admit because it would collapse entire industries built on making you feel inadequate. You're already enough. Right now, today, without the promotion, without the bigger house, without the fancy car or the impressive job title or any of the things you're killing yourself to achieve. You are enough. Your life doesn't need to be extraordinary to matter. In fact, it probably shouldn't be. The most meaningful lives I've ever witnessed were the ordinary ones. Eddie with his 5 o'clock departures and his weekend fishing trips. My neighbour Ruth, who spent 40 years teaching second grade and probably shaped more futures than any CEO ever will. My wife Linda, who held our family together while I was off chasing things that turned to dust the moment I stopped to look at them. Ordinary people, ordinary lives, extraordinary impact. I spent decades thinking I needed to be exceptional. I needed to stand out. I needed to achieve things that would make people remember my name. But you know what? Nobody cares about your name. Not really. What they care about is how you made them feel. They care about whether you showed up when it mattered. They care about whether you listened when they needed to be heard. They care about the small kindnesses that don't show up on any resume, but mean everything to the people who receive them. Here's a question I want you to ask yourself, and I want you to answer it honestly. If you died tomorrow, what would you regret? Not what would other people say about you, not what would be written in your obituary. What would you in those final moments wish you had done differently? I'll tell you what I would have regretted if I died on that gymnasium floor 7 years ago. I would have regretted every time I chose work over my kids, every dinner I missed, every recital I skipped, every time my son pressed his face against that window waiting for headlights that came too late. I would have regretted not telling Linda how much she meant to me, not with words, but with time, with attention, with presence. I would have regretted spending so much energy climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall the entire time. And that's the thing about regret. It's almost never about the things you did. It's about the things you didn't do, the chances you didn't take, the words you didn't say, the people you didn't prioritize while you still had the chance. Nobody lies on their deathbed wishing they'd worked more overtime, but plenty of people die wishing they'd spent more time with the people they loved. After my heart attack, I made changes. Real changes. Not just promises I'd forget in a month. I started saying no to things that didn't matter so I could say yes to things that did. I started showing up. Not perfectly, I'm still learning, but consistently. Tyler's basketball games. Karen's Sunday phone calls. Breakfast with Linda every single morning. No television, no newspapers. Just the two of us talking about whatever comes to mind. These last 7 years, the years I almost didn't get to have, they've been the richest of my entire life. Not because anything external changed. I'm still in the same house, still driving the same car, still living on the same pension I retired with, but everything internal shifted. I stopped measuring my days by what I accomplished and started measuring them by who I connected with. I stopped chasing some future version of happiness and started noticing the happiness that was already right in front of me. And here's the paradox that still amazes me. I'm happier now at 78, with less time ahead of me than I've ever had, than I was at 35 when I thought I had forever. Because when you understand that time is limited, you start to actually live. You stop postponing joy. You stop taking people for granted. You stop saving your presents for someday because you finally understand that someday is today. It always has been. If I could go back and talk to my 23-year-old self, that young man walking into the Ford plant for the first time, convinced he knew exactly what life was about, here's what I would tell him. Impina, stop believing that busy means important. It doesn't. Stop thinking that rest is laziness. It's not. Stop treating your family like they'll always be there waiting. They won't. Stop chasing approval from people who will forget your name the moment you're gone. Stop measuring your worth by your productivity. Stop sacrificing today for a tomorrow that might never come, and start showing up for the people who matter. Start having the conversations you keep postponing. Start saying I love you out loud, not because someone's dying, but because they're living and you want them to know. Start paying attention to the ordinary moments. Start taking the vacation. Start leaving work on time. Start watching your kid's face light up when you walk through those gymnasium doors. Start living like your time is limited, because it is. It always has been. And most importantly, start now, not next year, not after this project, not when you have more money or more time or more security. Now. Because I promise you the perfect time will never come. There will always be another deadline, another responsibility, another reason to postpone actually living. And one day you'll wake up and you'll be 78 years old wondering where all the years went and why you spent so many of them chasing things that never mattered at all. I'm 78. If I'm lucky, maybe I've got 10 more years. Maybe less. Probably less if I'm being honest. And I'm okay with that. I've made my peace with the clock. What I haven't made peace with is the thought of someone else making the same mistakes I did, someone else missing the games, missing the dinners, missing the moments that seem so small when they're happening, but turn out to be everything. You have a choice right now. Today, you can keep living the way you're living. Keep grinding, keep sacrificing, keep telling yourself that someday you'll slow down and enjoy what you've built. Or you can wake up. You can look around at the people who are right in front of you right now, and you can decide to actually be present for them. Not tomorrow, not next week, now. I can't make this choice for you, but I can tell you, from 78 years of experience and 55 years of getting it wrong, you don't want to be my age looking back with regret. You don't want to stand at funerals wondering if you really knew the person being buried. You don't want to learn these lessons the way I learned them, on a gymnasium floor, with your grandsons staring at you in terror, realizing that you almost ran out of time before you ever started living. The clock is ticking. It's been ticking since the day you were born, and it will keep ticking whether you pay attention to it or not. The question is, what are you going to do with the time you have left? If any of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you're going to do differently after watching this. Tell me who you're going to call, who you're going to show up for. I read every single comment, and honestly, hearing your stories is one of the things that keeps me going these days. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want to hear more from an old man who learned everything the hard way and just wants to save you some of the pain. While I'm still here, while I can still remember the words and find the breath to say them, I'll keep sharing, because that's what time is for. Not for accumulating, not for achieving, for connecting, for showing up, for being present with the people who matter, while you still can. The clock is ticking, my friend. What are you going to do with your time?